As we take a look back at the first round of the 2023 NFL Draft, many believe that the Detroit Lions lost the draft. The Jahmyr Gibbs pick was definitely criticized a lot, but the most scrutinized pick of the entire first round had to be Jack Campbell going to the Lions. In case you don't know who he is a very productive linebacker from Iowa who was taken with the 18th overall pick. Many believe this was a complete reach and a waste of a first round draft pick, but in today's video, I'm here to argue why it actually could be one of the best picks of the first round and why Jack Campbell could be one of the steals of this year's draft. He has an insane story, is one of the most humble and hardworking players in football, and I think has the potential to be a long-term NFL linebacker. But before we share his story, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you love football content, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, topic, team, or situation I can cover next. Now, let's talk about Jack Campbell. So going back in time, Campbell grew up in Cedar Falls, Iowa, which is about 80 miles north of Iowa City, and is home to the Northern Iowa Panthers. That is where his father played football on the offensive line, and like father like son, Jack would take up football. He also became super close with his grandparents and would stop by their house almost daily. This would form a lifelong deep bond, but would unfortunately lead to tragedy on one of the biggest days of his life. We'll get to that later. Why did Jack take football so seriously? Well, he was asked why he played. He said, quote, "I just feel like the Lord has given me so many unique talents and gifts, so why not use them to hopefully spread some positivity in this world? My family means everything to me, and being able to go home after a game and see the smiles on their face, whether I had the best performance of my life or the worst, that means the world to me as well, and just being able to give them some unique things that a lot of people don't get. That's my why right there." Honestly, I absolutely love his statement there, and God has talents for every single one of us, and I'm glad that Jack is using them. Growing up in that farming world, he learned fortitude, developed a hard work ethic, and had great manners, and he learned that from his grandparents and would later help develop him into one of the best athletes and leaders in the local area. He'd end up blossoming into a football star at Cedar Falls High School as he finished his senior season with 168 tackles, 13 TFLs, and 4.5 sacks. He'd helped Cedar Falls end the year with a 12-1 record, and he was seen as one of the best linebackers in the state. He was also on the school's state championship basketball team, where he played the role of getting steals, rebounds, setting screens, and getting their best player the ball, just like you probably expected. He also loved it. His team was unbelievably talented, as all 5 starters ended up playing D1 sports, and he said, quote, "My junior year, all 5 starters are playing D1. That's why Ferentz actually visited for a practice, and it was apparently one of the most memorable practices of Ferentz's life, and it was a show to watch." Campbell was a smart and hard-hitting linebacker who was ready for pretty much every challenge and was always in the right place at the right time. This is why he was starting to get some pretty high major offers from local programs, but he was still doubted. Jack said he remembers questions about him when he was being recruited. Some scouts were worried about his height because he was a 6'5" linebacker, some were worried he was too skinny, and then the most ridiculous one was that, quote, "I didn't have the right ankle bend." Jack was just as confused as I am reading that statement, but either way, they were just trying to make an excuse why they didn't want Jack. Some schools did though. Eventually both the Iowa Hawkeyes and Iowa State Cyclones started to fight over Campbell, and this was a huge recruiting battle in the state. Matt Campbell would strike first, as he would offer Jack after his sophomore year, while Ferentz would come around a little bit later. He played both inside and outside linebacker, and he was going to play both in college, and some thought he could be a defensive end. But where would he end up going? Well, the 3-sport athlete ultimately chose Iowa over Iowa State, Minnesota, and Northern Iowa. He said that their strength coach Chris Doyle was a major factor because he wanted to go from a skinny, unpolished player into a big-time college football linebacker. He said, quote, "Obviously strength coach Chris Doyle is at Iowa. He's one of the best in the nation, and that sits just right there. That's probably the second factor. He was a little bit closer to Iowa City than he was Ames, and while the Cyclones have had great defenses, Iowa has been known for that for longer." Either way, he chose the Hawkeyes, and this was a huge get for the Hawkeyes staff. Apparently, he was one of the most talked about players in the state that year besides Max Duggan, and I guess it makes sense because it was a bidding war between 2 arch rivals. What did scouts have to say? One said, quote, "He's been a relatively unheralded recruit, but has been one of the most productive commits in recent memory. He doesn't jump off the page athletically, but he has great instincts and a nose for the ball. Still a long way to go." That last sentence was very crucial, as he'd have a long way to go if he was going to develop into an NFL player, let alone a good college starter. 24/7 Sports agreed, as they listed him as a 3-star recruit, the number 44 outside linebacker, and the 662nd best player in the class of 2019. So, how would he end up doing at Iowa? Well, let's take a look. Campbell would arrive at Iowa as your typical Hawkeye recruit. He'd play right away on special teams in 2019, and even started one matchup with a depleted linebacking core. He ended up finishing with 5 tackles. In 2020, Campbell would take on more of a larger role. He finished with 29 total tackles, 3 pass deflections, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble, and 1 interception. He was clearly seen as a player who could take the next step and become a superstar for them, and also helped other players get used to the Iowa culture. As new running backs would arrive at Iowa, they were eased into the system by Jack's welcome to Iowa moment. One of the running backs said, quote, "He's a freak, I'm not gonna lie. If you can block him, then I feel I can block any linebacker in the Big Ten." That's how good Jack would end up being, and in 2021, he'd have his insane breakout season. He ended up finishing with 140 tackles, 53 solo tackles, 5 pass deflections, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble, and 2 interceptions. He had 1 pick six and even had a scoop and score against Iowa State. In 2021, Campbell actually led the nation in tackles that season and helped the Hawkeyes defense intercept a national high 25 passes. Campbell pretty much did a little bit of everything and was seen as one of the top linebackers in the country and probably could have gone pro after his junior season, except he had unfinished business. After his breakout 2021 campaign, Campbell said he planned to return all along, but the public was unaware of his decision. Eventually, some of his teammates told him he had to put something out there to end speculation. Jack was old school and just didn't really care. Campbell would return in 2022 and build upon his great 2021 season. He finished with 125 tackles, 1 pass deflection, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble, and 2 picks. He won the Dick Butkus Award for the best linebacker in college football, and also had plenty of other accolades. He was named a semifinalist for the Campbell Trophy, which goes to the nation's top scholar athlete, combining academics, football, and leadership. What's also worth noting is he always refused NIL opportunities because he wanted to focus on football and school. Jack had nearly 300 tackles in 4 years, and was probably going to be a day 2 draft pick. But there was a couple things that would happen before this. One was great, and one was tragedy. First, I'm going to share the good story. One day, his 2002 Toyota pickup truck had broken down on the street, and his dad came to help him upgrade vehicles. The next day, there was a wedding in Des Moines, and Dave thought his son would stick around and ride with the family. Instead, Campbell turned back around and headed for Iowa City. He said, quote, "There's a kid in a wheelchair, and he doesn't have many friends. He's in college, and I promised I'd hang out with him tonight." His dad then said he traveled back, gave him a tour of the practice facility, took him out to eat, and then joined us the next day. Honestly, that was really neat to hear, and just shows how great of a guy this dude is. But sometimes bad things happen to good people, and on his last college football game, absolute tragedy would strike. His grandfather was killed in Nashville during their bowl game against Kentucky, and a preliminary investigation basically said that it was rainy conditions and that his grandpa was in the street and got hit by a Holiday Inn Ford Transit passenger van. I guess he had stepped into the street, and while the family tried to warn him, he ended up getting hit and did not make it. The family chose not to tell the Hawkeye senior about the accident until after the Music City Bowl, and he played his final game, finishing with 10 tackles, and then was told after. I really can't even imagine hearing that news, and it's just absolutely heartbreaking. Campbell, though, did not lose sight of what was important to him, and got prepared for the 2023 NFL Draft. Good things would end up coming to him, as many projected him as the best linebacker in this year's draft, and some were saying he could go in the late first round. While he was not the flashiest athlete, flashiest player, or came from the most prestigious school, Campbell was a good selection. He ended up getting taken with the 18th overall pick in the first round by the Lions, and he fits exactly what Dan Campbell is trying to do there. He's one of those guys that can not only tackle, but he's super aggressive, has a clear mind, is a leader, can read offenses, is huge, can move, and is extremely motivated. He sounds exactly like a guy you want in your locker room and a guy you want running your defense, and that is exactly what the Detroit Lions are getting. No, he may not be the fastest or the most athletic freak in this year's draft class, but Campbell is everything you want in both a football player and in a human. The Lions are trying to rebuild their culture, and I think a guy like Jack Campbell is really going to help with that culture, and he's also going to be pretty good on the football field. I envision him playing 10 to 15 years in the NFL, and this will no longer be a scrutinized pick, and many franchises will probably say they should have drafted him. But what do you guys think? If you're a Lions or an Iowa fan, what do you think about the Jack Campbell story, and what do you think about the Jack Campbell selection? Be sure to let me know down below. Let me know what player from the 2023 draft I can cover next. Subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.